Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this EPC policy briefing, which is going to be focused on the forthcoming elections in Turkey. It seems like we've been waiting for this election forever, or at least that's how it feels to me. But now it's just a few days away. Sunday is the big day when major decisions are going to be taken, when Turks will be voting. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm happy to be joined by two really great experts, two wonderful ladies, although one of them is still waiting to join. Two wonderful ladies who are very famous journalists and presenters and authors in Turkey, or Turkey, I should actually say. So welcome, first of all, to Nazlan Ertan. I'm very happy to have you with us today, Nazlan, and hopefully we'll be joined very shortly by Nevsin Mengü. Hopefully she'll be here in a few minutes, but in order to not waste any time, I want to already start this discussion. So as I said, we're a few days away from the vote. I mean, society in Turkey seems to be very polarized. So what's your reading of the current situation on the ground? I mean, the polls, I mean, what can they tell us, if they can really tell us anything? What does the picture look like?
Thank you, Amanda. It's wonderful to be with you and see you after so many years. And I was actually a diplomatic correspondent in Brussels just when Turkey's European Union journey started in 1999. And I returned in 2001 to Turkey, thinking that Turkey was going to be a member of the European Union rather quickly. Like many of my analysis, it has proven not to be the case. So please take my analysis of the situation with a grain of salt, because I think by telling you this, I have proven myself to be sometimes a mistaken analyst. This election seems to be very interesting in the sense that perhaps there is a lot of hope and anger on the field in Turkey. Hope because after a large shuffling of the feet, the opposition has managed to come up with a candidate which seems to be the polar opposite of the tough guy image of incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu seemed a former retired bureaucrat, is soft-spoken, very restrained, and seems to be against the antithesis of polarization, which you have mentioned, Amanda, I think. So after some feet shuffling, he has managed to unite the major parties of the opposition, which basically means Turkey's oldest political party, Republican People's Party, CHP, along with 5 other political parties on the right, including 2 shootouts of the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, the tiny pro-Islamist Felicity Party, and of course, Meral Akşener's right-wing İYİ Party, the Good Party. When we look at the polls, we see that it's a neck-to-neck race. And of course, the pro-Kurdish HDP party, which is competing under the name Green Left Party, has not fielded its own candidate for the presidency, but it said that it was going to support Kılıçdaroğlu. So basically what we see is a very nail-biting neck-to-neck elections. Most of the polls I have seen give Kılıçdaroğlu a lead, which is between 2 to 5%. And actually I find this very ironic that there is this lead for a candidate which Erdogan once described as a person incapable of leading sheep. So finally, it seems, and there are even some polls, I think, released by MAC pollster, which speaks about a win for Kılıçdaroğlu in the first round. But I have to say, very few people believe that there is going to be a decision at the first round here. I live in Izmir, which is the stronghold of opposition, And even here, there does not seem to be a huge belief that Kılıçdaroğlu may sweep the votes in the first round, the presidential vote, and there is going to be a runoff in 2 weeks' time. Part of that, there are two other candidates perhaps we should mention. Muharrem İnce, I would say the bombastic castaway from the Republican People's Party, who was the previous presidential candidate, and Sinan Oğan of the Ata Alliance, who is a right-wing candidate. It is said that İnce may take away some of the votes from Kılıçdaroğlu in the first round, particularly among the young people, but then I have recently done an article about it, and it seems that many of the young people are now gravitating towards the two main candidates. So that seems to be very much the overall picture now.
Thank you. Just before I follow up, I just want to say to the audience, please put your questions either into the Q&A box or by clicking on the question icon, the hand icon, because it would be great if we can put these questions to Nazlan throughout the discussion. So I'm sure you have many questions, so please fire away. So just to follow on about what you were saying, particularly about Mr. İnce, I mean, what was the reason why he decided not to be part of the opposition alliance? Because it would have been better, if I can put it that way, if he'd stayed, if he'd been in the bloc as well, rather than having this sort of fragmentation that we're seeing, or some sort of fragmentation.
Many people in the center and the left of center have mentioned that. I think partly because there is a personality issue between Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu and Mr. İnce. And the second, there are, of course, rumors that he was encouraged by third parties that he could run. But when we look at his campaign, he seems to be going on and on about the refugee issue, which is a main issue in the elections, was a main issue at least in the beginning. And then, of course, he likes to say that he is his own man and he represents the CHP as it is, without moving to the, before it's collaborated with the two groups that perhaps Mr. İnce finds undesirable. That is the center-right, the AKP shootouts to Deva and Gelecek, which actually is chaired by two of Mr. Erdogan's former ministers, Ali Babacan, his economic czar, and at one point, his EU chief negotiator, if you will remember.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and Mr. Davutoğlu, the foreign minister, one of the long-servicing foreign ministers, who started with the policy of zero troubles and ended up with some sort of putting Turkish foreign policy with zero friends.
Yes, I think everybody remembers the famous, zero problems with neighbors, which turned into, plenty of problems with neighbors. But you mentioned about the race being quite tight, that maybe there's like a 2% difference between the two of them. But why is it that President Erdogan remains so popular? Because, I mean, against the backdrop of the, terrible economic crisis that Turkey has been through, I mean, a prolonged crisis that Turkey has been through. And then, of course, the devastating earthquakes of February and the fallout from that. I mean, how come he manages to sort of maintain such a high level of support? Because, I mean, taken together, he remains the most popular politician in the country.
I think he enters, I think Erdogan is definitely facing one of the largest challenges of his 20-year of rule, where he first entered as a prime minister, then became the president, and then sort of become a hyper president, if you like, with the executive presidency system. Well, and he definitely enters, you are right to say that he enters with a lot of chinks in his armor, if I may call them that. There is the high cost of living, to the extent that actually the opposition is making a campaign around onions, saying that onions, which were the quintessential poor man's food, has become too expensive. There is the effects of the devastating earthquake. Erdogan has come to power in 1999 after an earthquake himself, and at least his rise to power has started with that, because so much of Turkey's industrial heartland was destroyed, and he was the young mayor who made a visit to the region and promised that there is not going to be shoddy construction and people will be taken care of. And now we see, after so many years, another earthquake in an area that covers about 1/7 of Turkey, where most of the buildings, including buildings that were built during his time, has been razed into ground. The hallowed institutions gave a very shoddy and untimely response. And of course, the construction, we have seen that the construction, the construction has literally claimed lives. So that is the other economy, the fall of the infrastructure and the fall of promises. And of course, he has managed to alienate certain groups during this time, particularly with his recent alliance with the two political parties that I consider having very misogynist agendas. Those were the parties who have been lobbying fervently for Turkey's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention. And now they actually want to, at least one of them definitely wants to amend a very key article that ensures the protection of women from domestic violence. So having gone to that, I have also seen part of in the interviews I carried out, at least, part of Erdogan's support from conservative women being torn away because they are worried. And other groups, but then how does he, in this grim picture, how does he continue to be in power? One, definitely presenting himself as some sort of global leader, not in a Western context, but in terms of Shanghai cooperation, Turkic leader, the leader with the innovation, smiling at President Putin's side, exchanging ice creams with him, and standing up to the West, sort of populist global leader. And he has also managed to mend fences with certain groups. He has been successful in mending fences with Israel, less successful, but nevertheless going in the right direction with Egypt, mending fences with United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, so ensuring some sort of Gulf money to come to Turkey, which actually greatly relieved the Turks. And of course, I would have to say, even the humanitarian aid provided by the European Union has proven some sort of advantage to Erdogan, as many leaders came for the humanitarian cause to Turkey. And of course, he has done a great deal of subsidies economically, rising civil workers' salaries not only once, but twice, offering early retirement to 2 million workers who would welcome this early retirement, housing loans, and promises to cancel interest for student loans. So part of it goes on. And of course, the image of the century of Turkey works with a conservative, populist, nationalist part of the population. There is Erdogan with, alongside Aliyev with the electric vehicle. There he is with the aircraft carrier, which is actually, I think now anchored quite close to where my window is now in Izmir. And of course, the first astronauts on space, etc. when I went to his rally in Izmir, which is in fact the stronghold of the opposition, there were genuinely people who came there willingly, not people simply bussed by the AKP, because they wanted to see for themselves that their patriarch in his autumn was in good health.
Yeah, I can imagine that after the news that we heard about Erdogan's. I mean, first of all, it was called a heart attack, which turned out not to be anything such. But the rallies, I think, the size of the rallies in Izmir actually surprised quite a lot of people on the scale of them. But as you said, I mean, Erdogan's very good at doing populism. He's a leader in the field. But how do you think the opposition rate in their ability to sort of counter Erdogan's populism with their own? I mean, have they really risen to the challenge, or could they have done more, or they could still do more in the last few days?
Well, I think perhaps there is a great deal of Turks who have been tired of the one-man image that has been posed by Erdogan, or I would say one man and his family. And then suddenly you have a leader who seems to be not this noisy, me and my people sort of person, but a bridge builder. I think we have all followed how at one point the table of six, as we call the opposition, has fallen apart because one of the leaders, Meral Akşener, publicly said that Kılıçdaroğlu had no chance of winning. He had to be boosted with a more, how would I say, likely candidate, meaning one of the two popular mayors that has been on CHP. What we have seen when we sort of threw our hands saying that now all is gone, I mean, we had this 11th hour minute, which something that you actually see in EU councils even, that suddenly people come together, work out a compromise, find some brilliant wording, and in this case, putting those two men that Meral Akşener was so keen about as vice presidents, and then you go and you bring back the person who has just walked away. And that's precisely what has happened. And unlike some people who thought it was a moment of weakness, I thought it was a moment of strength, that this group that we called, which they call themselves Nations Alliance, and Erdogan and Bahçeli called the Alliance of Disgrace, was able to sort of gather themselves together, patch up the crack, stand up, brush the dust off them, and present a candidate and come up with it. And that, I think, that sort of bridge building, this sort of ability to do the opposite of polarization, has scored them some points in the eyes of moderates as Turks with common sense.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it's something that they would never have done in the past, coming together in that way and doing this sort of bridge building. But, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures, as they say. So I think it is something absolutely unique. But when it comes to the different voting groups, I think there's something like 5 million new young voters in Turkey during this time. What's sort of been the sort of outreach to these groups to get their votes? I mean, how have the parties managed to convince them? And do you see a sort of a bigger attraction to one side than the other, or is it equal?
Well, it is. There, I don't have any very clear answers. What I have seen, and what I have seen in the polls, in certain polls, and in Turkey, there is a lot of echo chambers, and there are a lot of people who are afraid to speak under their own names, etc. There seems to be a general unification of the first-time voters under Kılıçdaroğlu, and some of them initially for İnce moving towards Kılıçdaroğlu. But then perhaps these are the young people who have lost their faith, according to a recent survey, The Future of Turkey, which introduced about 3,000 young people under a sort of a demographic sampling, say that the young people have lost their faith in the system, which makes them very sort of likely targets for populist leaders. But then, so some of the young people I have interviewed said that they liked Erdogan's image of sort of defeating the whole world, standing up as his own man. Others said that's fine, but then Erdogan has been promising a great deal to the young people, such as free internet access, etc. And one young man I have interviewed said, what good it to me, all this free internet package, if half the internet sites that I want to go into are blocked by the government? So certain small things, even privately, Erdogan's own camp admits that Erdogan has lost most of the youth through silly things such as patronizing talks, such as banning spring festivals, such as going after their idols, rappers, etc. And that is a problem. However, the other issue is that the young people don't find Kılıçdaroğlu exciting enough. They look at him as some sort of sympathetic, soft-spoken grandfather. But what they don't want is they don't necessarily want a grandfather. They want somebody who is like them, who belongs to the 21st century, who is fine with innovation, etc. But the thing is, none of the four candidates is actually like that. So they will have to vote for what they can get. And according to the polls, they want to go to the ballot box.
Well, that's already a very good thing. But given the sort of unfair landscape in Turkey, I mean, the government more or less controls the media, or I think most of the media and other resources. So how is the opposition managing to overcome this? Because also, as we know, social media, there's also issues there. Have they been able to do this sufficiently enough to get their messages really across the entire country?
You are right in saying that it's an unfair battle. I mean, yes, the government after 20 years controls most of the media. It controls the courts. It controls a good deal of the social media through trolls, etc., and quickly blocking sites and unfavorable news. And also it has the control of the Supreme Election Council. You will remember that we all debated whether Erdogan could actually run for the third time. And he did. He is actually running for the third time. And of course, there are a lot of arrests of journalists, academics. They are taken under custody or judicially harassed. And one of the things that we have seen is, yes, people have become afraid of speaking, but they have also developed their own channels. For example, voting safety is a major concern, but about tens of thousands of people have, myself included, have volunteered to become election observers. Oy and Ötesi, Vote and Beyond, is actually mobilizing large teams to go to areas with where there will be a tight race. People say that, of course, there is going to be some sort of rigging of votes. But given all international observers from OSCE with the public support, etc., I think there is a limit to how much rigging can go on. If it is tightly contested electoral areas, 1 point, 2 point, maybe. But if it is a difference of 5 points, it is going to be very difficult to cheat in the elections. And we have seen in the local elections some years ago that if you go for a repeat, it does not necessarily turn in the best way, as the way İmamoğlu has clutched Istanbul, the jewel, the apple of Erdogan's eye, from AKP's grip. So I think President Erdogan is wising up from that. And I think it's going to be very careful. He's going to be more careful. I think the plan is that if the opposition wins, is to sit it out and make for the opposition to make a mistake and to see it whether the present government can come back in snap polls or early elections.
I mean, it's interesting that you say this, because there's quite a lot of, discussion around the EU as to whether or not President Erdogan would actually recognize the election results. I mean, the way that you're describing it, it sounds like he would recognize an opposition win. I mean, he wouldn't call it into question. I mean, of course, some of his, narratives that he's been using in the last few days, for example, referring to the HDP or part of this Green Party now. I mean, if they help the opposition to win, he won't tolerate that because he won't have terrorists running the country. I mean, is there any sort of truth that he could not, there may be a situation where he might not recognize the results? And if that was the case, what could be the consequences of that?
That's what we have been discussing here a lot as well. And I think that's precisely the question that we have had now, one of the questions we have, and I would obviously like to hear your opinion on it as well. But looking Erdogan has certainly said that he was not going to, to quote him, I think directly, the nation was not going to allow the presidency to go to the people who take their orders from Kandil being the mountains where the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party, which has been running an intransigency against in Turkey since 1984 and is considered is on the terrorist list of EU and the United States. Is based. So yes, Erdogan, in his usual polarization speech, has been doing a great deal of, paying a great deal of lip service to so-called the CHP, CHP, PKK link. He even goes as far as his men go as far as calling CHP KK, meaning indicating that it is the one and the same. And of course, yeah, and in some places, particularly in areas where there is conservative nationalism, it is working. It is working. And Süleyman Soylu has recently referred to a Western plot on May 14. Western conspiracies always work in Turkey very well. But when he was asked what he meant particularly, he backpedaled a little bit, so to speak. So in that case, is there going to be some sort of people taking into the streets, taking the victory out of the clutches of the opposition if they win? I don't like to think so. I don't think Turkey has gone that far as well yet. I think if there's a clear opposition win, there is going to be a change of government. Yes, there will be contesting. There would be complaints. There would be events, people outside here and there. But to be honest, I don't see AKP supporters coming to the central Izmir and crashing windows, if I may call it that. I like to think I hope I am right anyway.
So no mass uprising or violence, that you don't expect this. This is what I've understood, which of course is a good prediction that we all hope would come true. But what do you make of the recent electoral reform? I mean, the number 7393 that was written into law last year, but was recently implemented. I mean, how could this impact the election process. I mean, during the vote, but I mean, afterwards, more particularly in terms of the seats in the parliament, because I mean, there's been a change from the way seats were appointed in the past to now, which could also favor the AKP.
I am not an expert on this. That is why I was hoping Nevsin would show up and explain it to us. But from what I understand, from this, the new system is going to make it very easy and would sort of strengthen the stronghold of AKP in parliament. And Erdogan, counting on that, has put his senior ministers among the electorate so that he is going to have a very strong and experienced presence in the parliament. There, obviously, the support that the opposition would get from the HDP, Green Left, and other smaller groups is going to be very important, but there is going to be some sort of should Kılıçdaroğlu win the presidency. But AKP is still the first party in the elections. Should it come into that, it would be very difficult for the opposition to carry out its promises of reverting back to the parliamentary system and having constitutional amendments. I mean, if it were the other way around, I would say, for example, if there were a stronger majority of the opposition in parliament, but Erdogan was the president, Erdogan would continue doing what he has been doing, which is ruling by decree. But Kılıçdaroğlu has actually made more concrete promises that refers to a constitutional change. So the present electoral system, which would give Erdogan an AKP as the first party, a lead, would make it very difficult for him and would create further instability in the new government, strengthen Erdogan's hand as he bids for his time, for cracks in the coalition, and also for some, and possibly, as I say, instability that may lead to early polls.
Okay, thank you, Nazlan. I'm sorry that Nevsin still hasn't appeared. I think she must be having some difficulties. This is a bit unfortunate because it's a bit deja vu from the previous briefing we had. But you're doing an amazing job. I'm sorry that if I'm exhausting you with all the questions.
No, it serves me right, because I was the last time I was the one who couldn't show up. They call it divine justice.
Well, I want to sort of move a bit now to foreign policy. In the case that the opposition actually wins the presidency, and hopefully the parliament as well, because that would make life an awful lot easier, wouldn't it? So how do you see the change that would take place, first of all, in relations with the EU? I mean, they've prioritized normalization and revitalizing the relationship with the EU, which is a really great thing. But do you think that the EU is ready for a new Turkey?
I hope it will be. I hope it will be. It definitely will be. But on the other hand, we are looking at it realistically. What Kılıçdaroğlu and his team, and basically of former ambassadors, academics, etc., have foreign policy team, have promised is actually a reorientation of Turkish foreign policy facing the Western world. They have actually promised to, there has been talk about a reset in relations with Turkey, not only with the EU, but European institutions such as Council of Europe, which is at the point of suspending relations with Turkey over the case of Osman Kavala, the jailed philanthropist, and also with NATO. I think if there is an opposition win, there is a better chance of seeing Sweden joining NATO before the July summit. But having said that, I do not think it's impossible that Sweden will see that with the even if the incumbent, the AKP and the People's Alliance wins either. I think, and of course, Kılıçdaroğlu has also talked about reopening the EU ministry, even putting, and the rumors in Ankara is that Ms. Selin Sayek, one of the heavyweights of CHP, may end up leading it and become the chief negotiator. But I do not think that Kılıçdaroğlu and his team would think that Turkey would be back to the negotiation table, membership negotiations with the European Union. Instead, from what I have seen from their rather detailed memoranda, are two things with the European Union. One is the modernization of the customs union, and the other is aligning Turkey's sort of internal rules with laws, a legal system with the EU regulations, so that there could be a visa liberalization. And obviously the sticky point there has been the Turkey's definition of its anti-terror law. And if this could be, and I don't know how some other members of the coalition is going to react to that in the actual negotiations. Having said that, if Turkey could do that, or at least take steps, I think there are a lot of steps that EU could take, which is to provide some sort of roadmap to Turkey on visa liberalization. And I think EU has already done that to Western Balkans. And it could be done to Turkey, which would be a great gesture and a great starting point for confidence building, not only for the government, but for the Turkish people, particularly students, academia, athletes and artists, culture people, and probably at some extent to the businessman. I don't know how realistic it is. The other thing is, of course, to perhaps to build trust, start with including Turkish people, Turkish officials in the formal and informal structures of the European Union, go with the reinvigorate the Association Council, and go on with the dialogue, The sticky point is, of course, there is the 2016 refugee deal between Turkey and the EU. Kılıçdaroğlu has said that he wants to look at it, and he has said in his latest video clip that it is no longer possible that EU should be away from that mindset where it thinks, I have paid Turkey and now refugees is your problem. So obviously that is another issue to be discussed. But once real discussion starts, as Ambassador Mark Pierini was saying yesterday, then that's already a very good point. And on the long run, perhaps a more institutionalized relationship with a democratic Turkey is better for the European Union than a transactional relationship with a untransparent and unpredictable Turkey.
No, I agree with you. This is why it's very important in the event of an opposition victory that there's an immediate positive response from the side of the EU and a real willingness wanting to sort of re-engage on different levels as soon as possible, including, immediately a very high level visit to Ankara, I think, to sort of cement the fact that the EU wants to revitalize the relationship. I think these would be very positive steps. And I do hope that the EU does have a sort of action plan or a roadmap of how it's planning to re-engage with Turkey if there's a change of leadership. I'm not sure whether they do have this, but I think it's important. And I agree that it's getting back to an institutionalized system rather than this transactional relationship is definitely in the interests of both parties. But I'm guessing, as everything in Turkey-EU relations, nothing is going to be straightforward or easy. I also agree on the visa liberalization. I mean, Turkey should have had this, decades ago. I mean, they've been promised it. So if the last a couple of steps are taken, I hope that the response will be immediate. There will be no more obstacles, because I noticed in the last couple of years there was a significant increase in rejections of applications for visas to Europe, or the process of being able to obtain one has become very long. Sometimes people have booked holidays or cruises and haven't been able to go on them because it's taken so long to get a visa, which is terrible. So I hope that the EU really is able to get off to a good start with a new Turkey. But I think there's obviously going to be some issues. I mean, for example, how do you see the Cyprus? I mean, we can't have a meeting on Turkey without talking about Cyprus. The issue of the Cyprus problem. I mean, President Erdogan changed the narrative to a two-state solution. There will probably be pressure put on Turkey to go back to supporting the bizonal, bicommunal solution as a federation. So how do you see this?
That's a very good question. But before that, may I just go back to the last one on Turkey-EU relations? Because
yes, of course,
interlinked. I think one area where the new Turkey, if I might call it that, after Erdogan, Kılıçdaroğlu's government may have a quick win is the European Parliament. I mean, there it has already, Kılıçdaroğlu and the team has already said that it was going to reinvigorate the rule of law, sort of take the release unjustly prisoned people, be it the Kurdish politician Selahattin Demirtas or Kavala or cineast Çiğdem Mater, and also boost democratic governance in Turkey. I think that's an area where you would actually have a great impact in the European Parliament, which has been, and it has worked in Turkish-European Union relations before. So I think Turkey should also not be lazy nor arrogant in explaining itself to the all EU institutions on what it plans to do. Now, of course, with Greece, and I cannot think of Greek and Cyprus problem separately from each other, interestingly. But with Turkey and Greece, there has been, because one positive move in Greece, I mean, the good relations between Turkey and Greece affects at least softens the tone and creates the discussion platform on the Cyprus issue. And of course, with Turkey and Greece, we have seen some sort of disaster diplomacy. I wouldn't just call it earthquake diplomacy, because from what I understand, shortly afterwards, there has been this huge rail accident in Greece, where Turkey this time sort of rushed to I expressed its condolences and supported Greece. But after that, we have actually seen a better tone between the two countries. And we have certainly seen Turkey and Greece, frenemies across the Aegean, move towards each other and work out the issues. Some of the issues are very chronic, but many are actually nothing that a good technical team couldn't solve if there is a political will to do it. The same, I think, goes for a Cyprus issue. I mean, after the Crans-Montana has already had a good beginning, we now have a new president in Cyprus, who is also, I think, a huge EU enthusiast and is willing to work with the on the European Union. So with new governments on both sides, we might actually make a beginning. Create a platform, start talking. Of course, there is going to be huge issues. And of course, there will be parties on both sides who are not willing. And of course, there is going to be the issue of property, which is tacky, and the representation, and how should it go? But on the other, I continue to think that if there is enough support, and if there is a political will, there is a way.
That sounds very optimistic.
It does, doesn't it?
And you know, I hope that you're right this time up. But this is definitely a new opportunity for, you know, all Cypriots, Turks, Greeks, to have all their, you know, heads banged together, and to finally find a solution to all of the issues in the region, which are basically all based on the Cyprus problem. So after these decades, let's finally solve this and move on. But just moving to some other areas of Turkish foreign policy. For example, you mentioned before the migration deal. I mean, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu has talked about busing refugees back to Syria. I mean, I'm guessing this is probably election talk, but one never knows. And this would probably go hand in hand with the normalization with President Assad, because I think Kılıçdaroğlu was, even before Erdogan, talking about normalizing relations with Assad. I mean, he seems to be more determined to do it. Could this be something that would upset the apple cart immediately, not only with the EU, but also with the US? Because we know that Assad is still seen as, you know, a top enemy for the reasons that are well known. And also in terms of the Turkey's policy vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine. I mean, President Erdogan has had this, you know, balanced approach towards the two, which, I mean, has reaped a lot of benefits actually for Ukraine, quite honestly, but also for Turkey. I understand that the opposition, or Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, wants to maintain the same sort of policy, but with some, you know, caveats. Obviously, no longer supporting efforts for Russia to circumvent sanctions via Turkey or whatnot. So how do you see this, these two areas?
Despite all the good intentions, there are certain geostrategic realities that Turkey cannot get away from. One is that, of course, it gets most of its gas energy from Russia. And of course, Russia could make life very difficult for the new government in terms of energy, etc. In terms of tourism as well, now that we have the Russian tourist count among the first, I think, among the tourists who come to Turkey. So yes, whoever's in the government will have to find a way to deal with the Russian bear. It may not be as much of a close hug as Erdogan has been, President Erdogan has been getting, but there has to be some sort of modus operandi to deal with Russia, and always for, I mean, centuries since the Ottoman Empire, some sort of juggling that the Turkey will have to do because of its real estate, its place in the world, of dealing with the Western world and with Russia. Dealing with Syria is actually, and Assad, it's another question. Kılıçdaroğlu has actually written to Bashar Assad, if I'm not mistaken, after the earthquake to express his condolences. And Assad, not a great fan of Mr. Erdogan, is sort of sitting out the elections. Exactly, most of the Erdogan foes, if I may call them, are doing. But there is, I think tomorrow there is going to be a four-partite meeting between the foreign ministers of Turkey, Iran, Syria in Moscow. So we will see how this is going to go. What Kılıçdaroğlu has said so far is that he's not against, or Kılıçdaroğlu's team seems to indicate it so far, is that Kılıçdaroğlu is not against withdrawing Turkish withdrawal from Syria, provided Turkey's security concerns are addressed. So that is going to, this is the sort of the devil's in the detail sort of statement. So we are going to see how this is going to go on. With Washington, well, we are actually, the opposition, if it wins, it's going to go with a sort of the clean slate, and the relations may actually, with the Biden administration, we can see at least some sort of honeymoon, at least in the first period, particularly if the question of S-14s, Russian S-14s are addressed, and particularly if the the arms sales to Turkey goes through. And on Ukraine, well, I think the Turkish government will seek to be the facilitator in terms of the grain deal. They have been talking about that, but I don't know just how far it's going to be, if the new government will be as eager as the incumbent president to be some sort of peace broker in Ukraine, which actually has not come to much.
Maybe I can just come back to the issue of the ties with the US, because you mentioned the Russia S-400 defense system, which to the best of my knowledge is still, probably sitting in a box somewhere in Turkey. I mean, is it really plausible that Turkey can move this somewhere else without upsetting the man in the Kremlin? I mean, will that be a problem? Because if they're not to use, well, they're not using it, but I mean, the Americans have signaled in the past. I mean, they basically need to get rid of it, or that's what I've understood. But won't that be quite difficult if they still want to maintain some sort of ties with Moscow? And the other question is again related to Syria, because you mentioned Turkey's security concerns. Do you think there's actually really a proper recognition yet of Turkey's security concerns in that region? Because I still find quite often there's not really a genuine understanding. I mean, not maybe from some individuals there are, but broadly speaking, it's often perceived as just a slogan Turkey comes out with when they want to carry out some operation against the Kurds. If that's not too much of a loaded question.
No, it isn't. With the S-400s, I simply don't know what the solution would be. I mean, I don't know what the solution would be. It is sitting in a box. Will it continue to sit in a box? It will certainly not be given back, from what I understand. Could it be sold to a third country, which is one of the crazy scenarios that's going on? I don't know. With Syria, it is more difficult. Yes, sometimes the question of Turkey's security concerns, exactly as the way it has been mentioned in the Sweden and Finland, can be some sort of a critical sort of a shorthand covering, which is a portmanteau for something else. But to be honest, it is too early to see what sort of relationship is going to happen with Syria, and how will this new government will deal with Iraq, Syria, and the Kurdish issue, given that it's also a closer link with the HDP.
Thank you, Nazlan. We only have a few minutes left, and I'm very sorry that Nevsin wasn't able to join us finally, but I have a last question for you. How do you see the future if Erdogan is re-elected, if he comes back for another term, another 5 years? I mean, this is really a watershed moment for Turkey, for the future direction of the country, but I mean, most importantly for Turkish citizens and how it's going to, impact their lives. I mean, in some cases, their lifestyles, democracy and whatnot. So how do you see, what do you think the impact will be of another 5 years of Erdogan and the AKP?
There is a lot of debate about this, so I will try to sum it up quickly because it's a very large question. There are even people who say that this is going to be the last chance and it will be the last democratic elections that Turkey is going to see. You have actually I do not subscribe to that. I think elections will go on in Turkey in the next 5 years. And leaders are mortal men. So that is the first part. The second part, I think there is going to be, on foreign policy, I think there is going to be some sort of change, no matter who wins. Erdogan knows that the economic conditions of Turkey make it necessitate. Nevsin is coming?
Hi, Nevsin. I think we had an issue of timing. Is that possible? Hi, welcome. Can you hear me?
Hello, I'm a little late. I'm so sorry because of the hectic schedule in Turkey. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. We understand how hectic it is these days in Turkey. But we just have a few minutes left. But okay. It's nice.
I can very answer nice maybe one question at least.
Yeah, don't worry about it. But Nazlan was just asking a question that I put to her about what would we expect with another term of President Erdogan. What would that mean?
Yes. So, I mean, probably you talked about these points, but so what makes it different this time? I mean, we know Mr. Erdogan is a pragmatist and he wants to play the long game. I mean, for domestic politics, he says tough stuff, but then he wants to play ball with the EU and the United States and whatnot. But what makes it different this time is like, so because of the presidential system that we switched to in 2018, he needs to get more than 50% of the votes. And AK Party has a strong base, but it's not more than 30%, at most 35%. So he cannot get 50% of the votes. He's in a coalition with the main nationalist party of Turkey, but they're around 8% to 10%, so it still does not add up to 50%. So what he did is he enlarged his coalition. He has new parties. The new parties joined this coalition, but unfortunately, these parties are actually fringe groups. Two of these parties, one is this Felicity Party, basically, so let me explain it to you. Like it's a new party, but it's far Islamist. The leader of the party during COVID period, he was having these press meetings, pressers, where he was showing pictures of babies who were born with tails, and he was claiming that this is because of the COVID vaccine. So it's that sort of an extreme party. One other party is Turkish Hizbullah party, which is the Hizbullah that you know from Iran. They're basically Turkish branch. And also it used to be like an armed terrorist group in the beginning of 2000s. Police raided them. Most of them were in jail. They were arrested. And then Erdogan introduced an amnesty towards them. And most of them are freed right now. And they are in their party program. They want the education system to be re-established according to Sharia law. Basically, they want civil law in Turkey to be changed and stuff. So these are really, really fundamentalist parties. Let me put it that way. So it is going to be now, Erdogan is in debt. I mean, basically, he's in a coalition with them. These parties will be shaping AK Party's policies if they win. So this is one part. So we're going to see a different Turkey. Erdogan cannot escape this. Promises were made. This is one part. Second part is his economy policy will not change. Obviously, he keeps saying that. So he's going to keep keeping the interest rates low. And as far as I understand, he trusts in his friends, Russia and Qatar. He believes they're going to keep sending him some dollars, and then he can keep the balance in the central bank sheet, whatnot. But the economy is not going to take off, so it's going to be very hard for both, I think, the international community and the Turkish citizens.
That's a very enlightening picture. So I'm going to take the liberty of just running over a few minutes. I hope the audience doesn't mind, because I want to give the chance for Andre de Munter here to ask his question. I did try and integrate the questions of George Kasimakis and Andrew Gray from Reuters, but I want to give the floor to you, Andre, for the final question.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Yes, nice to see you, Nazlan and Nevsin again. Nevsin, I met very recently. Nazlan, it has been ages, but I can tell you that your eyes are still shining as they were when you were in Brussels at the time. Yes, really, I mean, there is really a smile in your eyes, which is much appreciated in the current circumstances. Anyway, and let me be clear that I pushed the raise hand button long before you addressed the issue of the European Parliament. I couldn't agree more on you. We are dying to hear some good news and some progress, like the release of Kavala, etc. You're quite right. Human rights, rule of law is very much very high on our agenda. That's also why it is so complicated with the customs union and the modernization. I mean, we haven't heard about the diaspora vote. How do you look at its importance, despite all the irregularities that we have seen? And Nevsin also mentioned Hüdapar, and you, Nazlan, earlier you referred to the concerns of conservative women. How would, well, the two of you look at the possibility of conservative women who voted in previous elections for the AKP or the coalition, let's say, now turn away because of this extremist and I would say misogynist agenda of both Hüdapar and the Yeniden Refah Partisi. And if I may just also ask, I mean, any predictions on how Muharrem İnce, on whom you elaborated, Nazlan, and I would add, to me, he is an angry old young man, the angry young man we know from literature. I think he never digested his defeat 5 years ago, and he is still very vindicative about it. But anyway, how do you think he would or could behave if the elections are not, if we go beyond the first round? And then finally, maybe in a joking way, although, I mean, if the opposition wins, would we go back from Turkey to Turkey? Thank you.
You go first, Nevsin.
Thank you, Andrea.
I spoke a lot.
Yeah, go ahead,
sorry,
Nevsin.
Nazlan. Sorry. Yeah, because I was late. It was all on your shoulders. If we would go back from Turkey to Turkey, I don't know. I'll ask the opposition politicians when I see them, actually.
I hope not, in that case, with just one intro. I hope not. My column is called Turkey Unplugged. I have not switched it to Turkey Unplugged, and it simply doesn't go.
Yeah, it does. And we have this show with Murat Seyrek, Talk Turkey.
Yes. So we have never switched, Andre, to answer you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So what was the question? Muharrem İnce. So Muharrem İnce has become, you know, Turkish politics is so fast, has become a little less relevant. Now Sinan Oğan is the more relevant person, who was the candidate of these racist parties. But he's putting on a smart face, you know, like he's being sympathetic, he's dancing, this and that, talking to young people. And there is that, you know, among these angry young men, I call them, I think, I mean, most of them, it's kind of derogatory, but incels. I mean, I think there is a really incel dynamic in Turkish politics these days. So he's talking to, like, they like Sinan Oğan. Now he's the real deal. And it could be, if Muharrem İnce and Sinan Oğan, both of them together, if they are above 5%, it's going to go to the second round. But the opposition, so I saw them last Saturday. There was a huge opposition rally, and I joined there. I've spoken to the politicians there, and then they're saying it's going to finish in the first round. They're expecting around 55% of the votes. I don't know if that's wishful thinking, but they were saying, no, that's not only wishful thinking. This is what we see on the ground, and these are the latest numbers that we're getting. So that's what they're saying, basically. And I hopefully it does not go to the second round, because if it does, it's going to be really chaotic. I mean, Kurdish vote is really central. It's very strategic. It's very critical in this election. So what AK Party is doing, they cannot get Kurdish votes anymore. I mean, HDP votes anymore. So they passed that, and they have MHP with them. So it's impossible. And it's become a really toxic relationship. So they cannot get HDP votes. And the HDP voters, and HDP endorsed Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu also, and HDP voters, according to the latest polls, they are going to vote for Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, you know, like 90%, 80% of HDP voters, they're saying, yes, they're going to vote for Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. So what AK Party is doing, they cannot change this situation. So what they're doing is they're trying to demonize HDP. They're saying HDP equal to PKK, terrorist organization, equals to CHP. And now, as of today, I was talking about that on my live. What AK Party did, they made these little stickers, which is saying, they put Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu pictures on them, and like they made Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu on these stickers is saying that we're going to free Abdullah Öcalan, the head of PKK, who's in jail, a criminal who killed more than 50,000 people. Who's in jail, obviously. So these are like fake news all over the world. They're putting these stickers all around Turkey on the street, and they're making as if like Kılıçdaroğlu said, we're gonna free Abdullah Öcalan. So to the like layman on the street, to like the standard voter, that's a wow. Are they really in bed with terrorists type of thing? So this is what they're doing. And this is going to be another critical game changer. And this is where Sinan Oğan comes in the picture, because in many AK Party families, so what we're seeing is like the standard AK Party voter, middle-aged people, like fathers especially, they're really loyal to Erdogan. They want to keep voting for Erdogan. But the children of these families, it's very uncool. Like they don't want to vote for Erdogan. They want change. They want something else. But what do they want? They cannot. They're not that eager to vote for Kılıçdaroğlu. It's CHP, opposition, you know. So Sinan Oğan seems to be an alternative for them. And like since AK Party is like passing this message, like the CHP is equal to PKK, whatever, they're terrorists. So maybe this could raise a little bit potential for Sinan Oğan, I think.
Over to you, Nazlan.
Okay, from where I live, which is Izmir, you have those young people who have Atatürk's signature on their sort of wrist, because they are Kemalist, and at the same time, the debate, I mean, what Nevsin has said about CHP, PKK works very well for them. But what I have seen is that most of it goes to, Muharrem İnce. And you ask those young people, why are you voting for Muharrem İnce to begin with? And the reply is that, well, he dances well, he drinks well. And you feel like saying, okay, then just invite him to a bar, but don't vote for him, vote for one of the other but more likely candidates. Ince has lost a great deal of the more, I would say, perhaps less emotional vote when he has ghosted his voters 5 years ago on the election night. So I think that is one legacy he cannot quite get away from. Sinan Oğan, yes, hip, better, with also an inclination towards those who want to vote towards for the ousting of the Syrians under temporary protection in Turkey. He has this appeal as well. So we will see how those go. If you ask me if I think the two of them, their votes combined will go more than 5%, perhaps likely to. So I think I think it's very likely that there is going to be a second round. You have asked about diaspora. Well, the thing is, I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, when we thought about diaspora, we basically thought of Turkish people who were very proud of, some of whom voted for the left-wing parties in their home country, but voted for Erdogan when it was elections in Turkey. But then the diaspora has changed. A lot of Turkish people who have fled Turkey for more opportunities, etc., have also become part of the diaspora. And I think their vote is going to change. When we look at, for example, Berlin, from what I understand, there's a Turkish population there who is going to vote for the opposition. So that we are going to see how this is going to score as well. One thing perhaps worth mentioning is the campaigns on social media in order to catch the young people. I think today Erdogan has come up with this video clip where there is one man sitting and 8 different barbers trying to cut his hair, which is a very unsubtle reference to the table of 6, which the president insists on calling table of 7 or table of 8, whichever catches his fancy. Then there is the other sort of the youth auto-censor clip that has been made, which claims rather strangely that Turkish youth isn't actually for Erdogan, but they're not admitting it because then the cool girls would not be attracted to them, so they have to appear as rebels. Fine, I mean, this goes, let's do this, but it doesn't, will it have an impact? Will it convince young people, or will they simply laugh it off? I think it's the second is the more likely. I mean, people don't care. They just look at it as jokes of the elections. Was there a third point? Oh, conservative women. I think definitely with Hüdapar and with Yeniden Refah, conservative women are moving away from the Justice and Development Party and from Erdogan. I think there he has made a mistake. Istanbul Convention was the first mistake. He was able to sort of manage it. It did deliver a blow, but with this debate on amending local legislation on violence against women, with this sort of rather macho claim that women who get divorced should not be accorded alimony for life, I think there he has hit a nerve. And I see actually women who used to vote for Erdogan, or whose parents voted for Erdogan, physically walking away.
Okay, thank you, Nazlan and Nevsin. I have to draw this, fascinating conversation to a close. I think you two ladies are brilliant. So thanks for joining us. We're all waiting for Sunday. We're all waiting for the election and the outcome. Fingers crossed we get the outcome that we want. EPC will be holding a post-vote briefing on Monday PM in person. So those of you who are in Brussels, please come along. There may be another post-vote briefing as well in 2 weeks. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll get the right result in one go. So thanks again to you two for coming. I look forward to having you again in a future EPC event because I think you're amazing.
In Brussels this time.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think,
in Brussels. We need to get you here. Thanks to the
I
audience.
hope it's not winter because winter in Brussels is horrible. So
yeah,
why don't we do that in Izmir? Why are we going to Brussels, man? Izmir. Why don't we do it in Izmir, Çeşme, please? What Brussels, please?
Yeah, no, we have a week of rain ahead of us. So thanks to both of you. Thanks for the questions, and I wish everybody an amazing afternoon. Until the next time. Bye bye. Bye bye.